Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is such an important event that will hopefully positively impact kids, which is the goal here. You know, a coach has a tremendous amount of influence on a child's life, and we just want to make sure that it's going to be a positive influence. And today we have a great group of people to help share that with us. And I'd love to just start with everybody introducing themselves. That would be, I think, the best way to start.
All right, I guess I'll take the mic here. Name is Mike Dube. I'm blessed that my career and calling are aligned. I've been dealing with kids professionally for over close to 20 years right now, besides being an athlete as a kid. I think one of my claims to fame would be that Tamir Goodman used to watch me play in high school. I think when he was in third grade doing crossovers on eighth grader, I was on the other side of the gym trying to figure out how I could build my confidence and self-esteem. And I used basketball as that conduit, and I'm extremely fortunate now to spread a message on a macro and a micro level in terms of building kids' confidence and self-esteem, and really trying to bring the best out of every single kid. So I'm one of those lucky guys, and they always say better to be lucky than good. But with the fact that we have such experts here to talk about coaching, there's one great quote that I just want to start with, that a good coach could change a game. A great coach can change a kid's life. So I feel that's going to be one of the narratives here today, and I look forward to learning, growing, and teaching and educating.
Kiva.
Akiva Klitzner. Wow, it's hard to follow that up, Mike, but I'm a clinical social worker. I have a private practice here in Jerusalem where I have the privilege of accompanying many adolescents, their parents, families. I work with soldiers as well, and sort of, that there is some crossover here with just performance stuff as well. But
I'm watching a podcast.
Sorry? Oh, we had someone pop on. Okay. And I get to accompany a lot of young people, and they're not necessarily athletes, but the topic of coaching and just parenting and that intersection. And I think that's another question, Tamir, that we may want to sort of add on is role of parents, and are they even welcome into that relationship with kid coach, that triangle? Is that are we overbearing, especially if you're a former athlete? I can only imagine how complicated that gets. But in short, I get to work with young people and their parents, and this issue comes up quite a bit: the effect of the coach and the role of the parents, and what opportunities are missed sometimes in coaching, and sometimes, unfortunately, where damage is done.
Awesome. Kevin.
So I'm Kevin Owens. I played pro basketball for about 9 to 10 years and played a lot overseas. And it's funny because earlier today I was at my daughter's game, so I had full-on experience with how some of youth sports are handled, how the parents are on the sideline, how the coaches are. And it's an interesting perspective as I am outside the Philadelphia area and just going into a gym and seeing how coaches handle things, and the need, I guess, to be the best at such an early age is creating this influx of emotions and stress and other different effects, mental effects on children who are just trying to have fun playing a game. So I see that firsthand this morning. It was pretty funny to know that I was coming on this, and also be able to watch it firsthand when, you have a coach yelling and screaming on the sideline. And you're like, they're 10 years old, relax.
Yeah. And thank you so much for hosting this, Kevin. And I think that was a great lead into our first, I think, item, which is, vulnerability. Like, God forbid, like, there's a pandemic out there of kids that are just being really, really hurt right now. And I think if we could start talking about, what, God forbid, what is some of the damage? Like what could potentially happen to these kids that are being treated this way or that are interpreting things this way, especially when they're at such a vulnerable age and their brain is still developing. I think if we could start talking about the grand problem here, the grand channel, that would be a great.
No, Tamir, I'll take that to start with, and I want to back it up even a little bit further. Just give some sort of global picture here for a minute, because I think, what's so unique about this is that, first of all, we've gone, just parentally speaking, societally speaking, we've gone from a very paternal style of parenting, right, that maybe we grew up in, where it's sort of dad knows best, and there's certainly, some yelling and some, sort of, just fall in line. Kids, should be babies seen, not heard, all these old adages that are thankfully mostly gone from the world. But and by the way, what would land a kid on the couch, on the therapeutic couch I have right behind me, would be, there's not enough love in the kid's life, there's not enough warmth. And thankfully the pendulum has swung to a much more maternal style of parenting, and I say the same thing about schooling as well, where it's much more warm and inclusive. And what maybe lands a kid on the couch is maybe some of the opposite, helicopter parenting and something more enabling and that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden this kid who maybe has a gift, meets coaching, and it's something so foreign and old school in many ways, and completely ill-equipped to handle this this loud, in your face kind of sometimes rigid and cold attitude. And I think that creates already this sort of stunned young athlete, and says, I'm not even sure. So he's confused at best, and maybe already in distress.
Mike?
Yeah. So we could chime in. There's so much going on here, because it's sort of like I'm one of those kids who, luckily my Adderall just kicked in, so I'm able to focus. But I think some of the biggest challenges in youth sports are actually the parents. I read a statistic a while ago that said that 80% of kids drop out of organized sports by age 13 for two reasons. One being parental pressure, and number two, it's not fun anymore. People have taken the fun out of the game. And for that kid that's not a student, for that kid that's socially not strong, sports is his crutch. I always say to parents all the time, when it comes to boys, sports is the currency. And every parent wants their kid in the mix. But how do we make it a positive experience for kids? How do we teach kids? Because you guys all know sports is life. That's one of the things I love about it. Everything in life is connected to sports. That's why I have such a deep passion about it. As a child, I was a very good athlete, but I didn't know how to win. I didn't enjoy winning. I didn't know how to lose. And as we all know, that is a recipe for disaster in life. So there are so many directions we could go in this conversation here. But I think that the more we talk about these things, it's a different generation, like you said. It's not the parenting that we were used to. You got to communicate with kids, you got to talk to them. And in today's day and age, post-corona, however people can make kids feel good, wherever they find their mojo, we have to build on that, because it makes such a big impact for their entire life. So I hope that out of today's conversation with the expert minds here, that we could at least come to some conclusions that could help guide parents. Because like Kevin said this morning at his kid's game, you were watching and you're just a parent in the stand. Some of the stuff I've seen out there within sports is dangerous. Dangerous.
You might have get a video.
Yeah, I definitely see some coaches here, and I'd love to maybe start off with a couple of pointers. For example, if you see like a kid, traditionally, we're talking about old school, bad body language. Keith and I spoke about this the other day, like bad body language. Oh, you're not motivated. You're not part of this team. I'm going to bench you, speaking in these terms to kids where there are certain kids that may not have the skill set. They may be dealing with certain things that they can't tell the coach how they're feeling. They may be struggling with something, And I would just love if we could give a couple of tips here to say, like, hey, if you see a kid, I don't know, that's dyslexic, a kid that's has ADD, a kid that has ADHD, or any other challenge, like maybe there's a couple of tips on like how to communicate with kids that are dealing with certain challenges. That couple of tips that we could give a coach. For example, maybe a dyslexic kid, you might not want to like bury them in drills where there's a bunch of numbers involved, or understanding some of the differences and how we could communicate to impact these kids, because most likely, like Mike said, they probably need more love than a traditional kid, and they probably care about this more than a traditional kid, and they might not even know how to express it, and they're the kids that are getting the most hurt.
No, that's 100% factual. The students of the game who have that learning disability, a lot of coaches still teach in that old school mentality. And granted, there's kids have been kids with learning disabilities throughout time, but to make the game more acceptable, we have a lot of these practices where it's like you're saying to me, or like drill after drill after drill, and that mindset starts wandering, and then we start getting on them as coaches, being like, you have to focus, you have to pay attention. How do you not know this play? How do you not know how to do this specific drill? Weren't you watching from the sideline? When we have kids who really do have struggles with their mentality, and then you look at, on top of that, you have you're combining with the school day, and you're combining with other extracurricular things and homework, and it just becomes a lot for a student of the game. And Mike, like you had said, there's so many kids who drop out because it just becomes less fun. And when you're learning disabled and you're dealing with this struggle, and then all of a sudden you have a coach yelling at you, it becomes less fun real quick.
Well, I'm going to chime in a little. I'm going to chime in a little on that, Kevin. You have those coaches, as we all know, you have those X and O's guys, and then you have the guys where, you're learning one of two ways, either visually or you're listening. I know for me, visually has always been much more effective than an X and O type of guy. But today's day and age, kids' brains are different. The computers, the iPhones, everything has changed. The kids, they say recently that the average attention span of a human being is 8 seconds. 8 seconds. The average attention span of a goldfish is 12 seconds. The kids, everything, and I saw that on Google, so I'm assuming that there's probably two other sides to that story. But kids learn differently today. As a coach also, you have to coach the individual. I tell parents, even from a parental perspective, you have 5 kids, you got to parent them all differently. When you're coaching kids, the goal of a coach is how exactly could I get the most out of that player? I know as a volunteer coach and even professionally, I'm able to give tough love, but tough love has to be done with white gloves. Kids do not adapt to screaming anymore. It goes one ear, out the other ear. Coaches have to learn how to be a little bit more softer within the environment that they're in, because you're taking 10, 12 different personalities and you're trying to figure out how to get them. Those are the most effective coaches and motivators, where you understand that each kid is an individual and they're within a system, and you need to figure out how exactly to get the most out of that kid within the system, as we all know as athletes. Some coaches you're going to like, some coaches you're not going to like, but you do need to universally respect them. And that a lot of that starts at home, which is a whole nother podcast.
Agreed. There's so much to this. This is so layered and so complicated. And I would sort of, and it's beautifully stated, Mike, but I would also say, you got to know your team. You got to know your kids first, right? Like who are these kids, right? They're not athletes. They're first of all kids. I don't know, but here in Israel, you usually get a head start. Basketball means you're coming into these teams usually around age 6, 7, right? Tamir, you mentioned, how vulnerable these kids. I mean, this is, we're talking 1st, 2nd grade, have no real formed sense of identity, and you're coming in and you're basically, all you know is, do I play or do I not play? Does coach look at me or does he not look at me, right? The currency is minutes and attention from coach, right? And that's how I'm going to judge my self-worth pretty early on. Coach has to understand, first of all, who are these kids? Where do they come from? Where do they sleep at night? Of course, and what are what's the family makeup? But of course, that how do they learn, right? How do they communicate? How do they learn? These are things that you can't pick up on just by, watching a kid in practice. Does he pick up the drill or not? So I think it starts with parental involvement. And you're right. This is another podcast and a half for sure. How do we as parents get involved without scaring off a coach, without, being overbearing? I think that's, again, complicated and layered. So Tamir, you famously, played successfully and wonderfully and made a career out of it with a learning disorder, disability. Can you talk, for a minute to the crowd, like tell us what worked for you, what communication style did work for you?
Yeah. So, just three quick things. Number one, Mike, remember my father, blessed memory. My father,
Tough. Tough.
He only commented one time in my entire career. I was fortunate enough to play, in school and middle school, high school, college, and 7 years professionally. There's only one time my father ever mentioned something on the court ever. And it was after I hit a game-winning shot. I was like 9 years old. There was this thing in the 90s called raising the roof, like, when you thought you were the man. So I raised the roof after I hit a game-winning shot. And we were driving away, and in the parking lot, he gave me a hug, and we were just about to pull out. And he said, "You know what? You should never. I'm happy you hit the game-winning shot, but you never react that way. You always must practice humility." That was the only thing my father ever mentioned to me anything about basketball. He never said another word in college, professionally, high school, ever. And I got that message from him. And so I think that teaches us, like, as a parent, the best thing you could do is just be unconditional love and have a great ear. If I had to say something about the game, he would listen. But ultimately, his job as a father was first and foremost just unconditional love and listening. I did have a terrible experience with one of my college coaches who assaulted me. And that's something that I'm 40 now, and it still hurts me all the time. So that's part of why I'm so passionate about this, because I know what it's like to have a coach that could, like, almost destroy your life. Ultimately, I flipped it around and made me an extra sensitive coach, because I'd never want them to have to deal with what I had to deal with. But I also had the greatest coach who let me know that my dyslexia, was actually a hidden blessing, and it was allowing me to see things on the court that other players didn't see. And that was my confidence going on the court. So how did I handle such a learning disability? I flipped it around because of my coach, and who made me feel like I was a superhero and not a nebuch, basically. So I think those are some of the tips that have helped me throughout my career. And now that I'm coaching, one thing that I love to do is, we here in Israel, when I train, we train at 6 a.m. So I get up at 3:45. I got my little TRX station right here, and I work out, like crazy, and I do everything. Even though I don't start till 6, by the time I get to the gym at 6 a.m., I'm feeling so good about myself, emotionally, physically, and mentally, that the second I walk in the gym, my guys know I love them, like at 100%. I have no baggage on me. I don't care what else is going on in the world. I'm all there for them, and I'm all heart, and they pick up on that. And like what Mike was saying, then it's much easier to give them constructive criticism, because it's coming from love. It's not coming from anything else. It's not because, I had a bad day at home and now I'm taking it out on you guys, or, I had a bad, no. So I think a big tip for coaches is walk into the gym feeling great about yourself and knowing what your role is in the gym. Your role in the gym is to build these players' confidence on and off the court so they could have a happy and healthy and meaningful life. And my last thing is, just like Coach Katz, we were walking into school one day in 11th grade, and the principal of school asked my coach, "Hey, are we going to have a good season this year?" My coach says, "I'll let you know in 30 years. He's like, "Well, what do you mean? Are we going to have a good season or not?" He says, "Well, in 30 years, if they're good husbands, all right, and they're good leaders in their community, then I know we had a good season, and that's the kind of, that's what sports is all about. We're here to help kids, and so many people are getting so lost, and then we're taking the thing that the kids most love, and we're burying them. And the stories and the nightmares I've been hearing this week have been so hurtful. So, those are some of the things I've learned, but I'd love if you guys could share, or we could take any questions too from parents or coaches. We're just all here to help, just help and share.
Tamir, go ahead, Mike. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Kevin. It's such a great crew here. It's almost one of those podcasts where I want to listen so I can learn more. But what Tamir said was so spot on about the impact that a coach has. Is a great quote, and I wrote it down because I wanted to be very clear with it. I believe it's by Mike Krzyzewski, who's just a titan in what he's accomplished and what he's done. It says, we don't just coach sports. We coach people, choices, consequences. We coach respect. We coach life on and off the field. A coach will impact more young people in a year than an average person will do in a lifetime. That is the power of a coach in a positive and a negative. So that's why Tamir was talking about coaches that he's had. I had coaches who said, as a matter of fact, in TA, said, hey, do whatever you want. But that's not how I learned. I learned by the coaches who said to me, you got to work, you got to fight it out, and you've got to figure it out. And that helped shape and make me who I am. But as a coach, I mean, kids have to, I believe it's only in the dictionary where the word success is found before work. That's a good one for the coaches out there. I mean, there's so many quotes out there about this stuff, but we have such a power of influence over these kids. But sometimes, like I said before, the parents are our worst enemy. And sometimes they need the greatest education. That father who was a great athlete, who has in high school and college and has 3 boys, and 2 of the 3 are not athletic, that dad's just thinking, how exactly am I going to push my kids to be me? Mistake. Wrong. When it comes to parenting, when it comes to coaching, the more you push, the inertia pushes back. And kids, I never use the word bad, ever. Loser is bad enough, but you call a kid bad at 9 years old, you had a bad game, you were a bad player, I promise it never, ever goes away. These small little things stick with kids. Words matter, as we all know, as parents and as coaches. And we as adults need to think before we speak when we're dealing with our players. Some of the stuff I've seen at games I've gone to, just the body language, the teams that when there's a timeout and the whole team gets together, they're building a unified culture. When the coach is only talking to those 5 players like the only ones that matters, you lost the other players. So these are just small tips, because I feel like we could do a marathon podcast on this stuff. And I think it should probably be in the next State of the Union, because people can really learn everything about life as we do sports. So that was just my 2 cents on that particular topic.
No, I think that's incredible. And, jumping off both of the parenting aspects before we go back into the coaching is, there was a great thing by Kobe Bryant where he talked about what his dad said when he was young and how he was frustrated with himself. And his dad's like, listen, I'm going to love you whether you score 60 or 0 points. I'm going to love you the same. And giving that child encouragement like that, letting them know that your love is not based on your athletic prowess and it's just based on you being you, obviously will help tremendously at home. And I think that's kind of going into the question about how hard you can push a kid when you don't know what may be going on internally with him. I just want to jump in real quick as putting on my teacher hat. There was always a way where you learned very early that you had to teach kids differently. You can't teach. We used to have this entire general approach where you teach the team and you teach them all the same way. Like what happens to one happens to another. But we're such an individual society. I think, Mike, you hit on that with the iPads and everything. We become more individualized. So being able to teach, you can't. This might not work for this kid. It could work for this kid. So you almost have to figure out what works best for each individual player. And I know that's a difficult concept, but as Tamir said, like, you're there to coach and you're there to be a positive role model. And I think a lot of coaches let their ego slip in and be like, well, I want to win, but it's really not about you anymore. You're there to develop and create opportunities for younger players. So having that ego step put aside was definitely something that I put down in my notes as a way to effectively help, these athletes get better. Put your ego aside and understand that you have to individualize some of your treatment of players, because this person's going to learn differently than this person. We're all individuals. That's what makes this world so amazing. We're all diverse. It's what makes it beautiful. And that's why we love where we are. And I think as a coach, you have to understand that.
I'm going to interject for a quick second here, because This is just, I'm in my home, I'm in heaven talking to you guys here because it's just, it's bringing back everything. I always tell players, sometimes parents will say to me, my kid's not getting any time. Should I call the coach? I said, first of all, a parent should never, ever go over to a coach during a game and even err on the side of caution going after a game. Now, when a parent says to me, my kid deserves more time, I always say, do you want your coffee black or with sugar? You've got to teach your kids life lessons. You teach your kid to work harder. Well, he doesn't get the ball on offense. Then let him become a great defensive player, because that takes a lot more heart and effort than just shooting a ball. And a lot of parents think that by them making it easier for their kid, they're not helping their kid out. And you see that a lot within sports. And I always tell a kid, your goal is know your role on the team. And Kobe Bryant was such a great example. To me, one of the greatest ever to play the game. And he had a great line that said that when you're good, you tell others. When they're great, they tell you. He was great. His work ethic. I watched the Olympic video. I think it was 92, when all the players were coming back at 5 a.m. after partying. Kobe Bryant was going to the gym to practice. That mentality then translated over to that group that eventually won the gold. So Kobe Bryant is such a great example of a work ethic and heart. I think a lot of kids today, they're lacking heart. The game is different right now. You don't see boxing out. I don't want to go into the intricacies of this thing, but it's a different game than when I grew up playing. I played defense on a guy, and my job was to shut him down. That was my job. After he shot the ball, I turned around and boxed him out. Kids don't even know what boxing out is. They don't even know what a record player is or a payphone. So it's a different generation of kids. So we're solution guys, not problem guys. A lot of people create the problems. We're the one that's creating the solutions to the problems.
You want to?
Can we let Steve?
Yeah. There we go.
Hi guys. So I have a quick question. I was in the synagogue yesterday, and we were talking to some of the other parents, some of the guys, and they were recounting. I'm not going to mention the teams or the names or the coaches, but basically there was 2 teams, local teams. One team was blowing out the other team in 7th grade, and it was a huge lead. And the parents of the losing team were saying that, you know, they were upset that their coach, A, did not necessarily put in the backups right away, even in a blowout, and B, they were upset that when the backups were in the game, he wasn't really coaching them. He was sort of just sitting and letting them play. And on the other side, the other parents on the winning team also were upset that, you know, they at that point had their backups in, their 2nd and 3rd string players, and the coach was not coaching anymore. And they're upset, well, why is this coach not coaching? Because he only was coaching when the starters were playing, but when the backups are in, he doesn't really tell them what to do. So it sort of shows that to those 7th grade players that the coach doesn't really care what is happening in the game because they're winning by so much. So it was a whole discussion about what's the right thing to do. Are you supposed to coach even in a blowout so that you're starting your 2nd and 3rd stringers can feel that they're still important to the team? Or do you sit back and not make it seem like you're trying to make it even worse and let the other team get beaten even more because, you know, it's not even like, you know, the right thing to do is to keep coaching in a blowout, you know? So it's really just how do you coach, you know, so like the backup players in both situations from both sides, you know, because both players were upset on either side. Both parents were upset on either side that one team was, you know, sort of coaching and one team was not, you know.
Anybody have an answer?
I mean, we could all answer. I think we could all answer that. But I'll start out by saying, Zib, that's a very, very good question. It's a very, very real question. But what we can't forget, which a lot of parents forget, is that the parent's job is to parent. The coach's job is to coach. A coach that does not give respect to those players who get that garbage time, whatever that meant, and I could tell you hundreds of experiences of garbage time where I made the most of it, is dangerous because you're now losing the connection to the player. The coach is the adult. The coach's job is to coach the strongest player to the least strongest player. So I put that on the coach. And also in terms of blowouts and stuff like that, I tell kids, and it becomes easier as an adult, the game is over. The game is over. And I always say to kid, and you, all the coaches listening, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. You learn. But a coach that does not coach the entire team, that is on him. But Kevin hit it right. Sometimes these guys are more concerned about the egos because nobody's talking about that game the next day. Nobody. But you impact a kid in a negative way where a coach does not show him any respect, you will lose the interest of that kid. That's part of that danger zone we were talking about, where coaches just only focus on the strongest players and not the others. Well, if you don't prime or prep these other kids, they're never going to be in that situation. So I don't know the coaches, and I'm glad you didn't say it, but maybe he should be listening to this podcast.
Go ahead, Akiva.
Yeah, I just want to add, it's amazing. Like, as we're talking about what a complex role you guys play, you you coaches out there. I mean, I don't want this to come off as vilifying anyone. I think, this is truly one of the more complex things to take on. And often these are, very young people, probably still in school, not getting paid very well, doing that requires such an unbelievable, juggling act. You got the team chemistry, you got the parents, you got the actual games, you got practice time, you got all the different calculations going on in your head, and it's a lot. And I'm thinking, again, just as a therapist, and I get one-on-one time with clients, I go for supervision. It's hard enough just the one-on-one time, and I don't know what's out there in the coaching world, but it feels like a real need, to have, everyone have their own Mike Krzyzewski, where you can reach out to and basically, say this, look, I'm dealing with, these are my issues. These are my problems, maybe my team's really good and we run up the score a lot and that's uncomfortable, or maybe the other way around, or we're getting clobbered and, and I'm just trying to get the best. I mean, it's loaded, it's complex, and it feels like we need another adult in the room, maybe not just that one.
Yeah, and I just to add on to what you guys are saying, to me, it's all about being a role model. You're never as good as you think you are when you win. You're never as bad as you think you are when you lose. And the main thing here for the coaches is you have to be a role model. There's a way to win. There's a way to lose. There's a way to talk when there's a problem. That's to me, one of the biggest problems with all the screaming and yelling is, like, you would never walk into work and start screaming and yelling at your colleagues or your boss, or when you get married, you would never start screaming at your wife, God forbid, or anything. So why are we teaching our kids like that's how we handle situations, right? As a role model, to answer Zave's question, in my opinion, there's a way to win, there's a way to lose, there's a way to act. And the coach is the person that has to be the role model in those situations. It's the most important thing. We're teaching our kids how to win. We're teaching our kids how to lose. We're teaching our kids how to bounce back. We're teaching our kids how to, constantly get better. There's always things you can work on, being that there's always a way to be a role model in every situation. And that's what the coaches need to think about. And I think that's some of the things that get lost here. When you start speaking, I heard a story this week of a kid, of coaches talking to kids in an ultimatum. You're either going to do this or I'm going to do this. Like, that is not a way to talk to a kid or to talk to a spouse, or you wouldn't go around in life telling another person, you're either going to do this or I'm going to do this to you. Like, there's a way to act. There's a way to be a role model. And I think if we give the kids that space and we're the role models, they're going to be much more likely to, it's like a skill set, to gain that skill set and say, hey, coach, what can I do better? Or, hey, coach, communicate. It's all about learning how to communicate, because that's what you need to be able to do in life. And I think we need to be role models. We need to be role models in every situation. That will give the kids the confidence they need.
Tell me, I'm going to interrupt for a second. I think Kevin might have had something to say. So I'm going to pop back over to him. But it's role models as people, parents today. Don't tell your kid to be respectful if you're disrespectful to your cleaning lady. Don't tell your kid. The problem is that kids do what they see, not what you say. Parents need to learn to demonstrate certain behaviors. Don't expect your kid to get involved in charity work if you're not doing it. Don't expect your kid to clean off the table if you're telling the nanny to. It's parents are scared to parent today. And I saw something that said parents don't want to be parents. They want to be parents, P-E-R. You're not your kid's friend. You know when you're their friend? When they have kids. Until then, you need to raise them and lead by example and show them how to act. Look, we all know we're athletes. When the game is going on, you get heated, the blood is flowing. It's tough to sometimes control. When I used to coach volunteer my daughter in basketball game, I got very, very heated, but I learned how to modulate my volume or my temperature. But parents have great expectations of their kids, but wait a second, don't tell your kid something if you're not doing it. And every kid has their own suitcase. Every kid has something going on that you know nothing about. The question is, do you want to find out? Do you want to ask? I always tell kids all the time, validate people. You go into a building that your grandfather owns. Do you know the name of the doorman? You know, the maintenance guy said to one kid once, you don't learn their names, I'm done with you. You learned them all real well. So parents can't be scared to have expectations of kids. You need to. How else are you going to grow functioning adults? If we don't repair broken kids, you know what they become? Broken adults.
Agreed. I know, Ziv, you have another question. Dan had said that he wanted to add to the present conversation. So Dan, if you wanted to unmute and join the conversation, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to add to what Ziv said earlier with regards to the coaching between the blowout coaching blowout, because I'm part of a school, I will leave it nameless, and we did have 2 games this week where one of our teams was on one side of a blowout and another of our teams was on another side of a blowout. And I always, when I coach, even when I put in backups, I'm always giving them pointers that are not look like I'm trying to run up the score, but at the same time, hands up, defensive position, giving them pointers and coaching them the way I coach it might not be the same intensity because I don't want to show up the other team, but at the same time, I always try to give them the same attention. I'm out of my seat. I'm coaching. I'm giving them, and I'm not running up the score, but at the same time, good shot. That's a good pass, hands up, and stuff like that, which is what I find to be very, very successful. I was on the other side of a blowout where my team was getting blown out and the other coach was going ballistic because one of the guys committed a foul. And it was like, and they were up by like 18, 19 with a minute left. And I was like, come on, like take it easy on the kid. He barely gets to play and that's happening. So I was on both sides of that, what Steve said. And I think that there is a fine line of, coaching, but also, taking a tiny step back in order so that the kids that don't really get the playing time on either side of a blowout, they're still learning, but at the same time, you're not showing up the other team. So I just wanted to add that because I do think it's important. And some coaches don't know, that fine line.
No, like 100%. The consistency, and Tamir, you brought this up earlier, kind of jumping off Dan's point, the energy, you need to bring that energy regardless. You need to bring that energy as a coach to show your players that you care. I mean, it's just, how are you going to channel that energy in a positive manner? But Tamir, if you wanted to add, I know we have a few questions in there.
Yeah, that was a great question. The way I would do it is, first of all, for the kids who don't really get a lot of playing time, and this is their shot to get some playing time, I would calm them as much as possible as a coach and say, hey, this is your shot. We're all here. We love you. We support you. Don't feel nervous. This is something that I tell kids all the time that don't get a lot of playing time. Do something small. Basketball is all about confidence. Like, you have a big meeting, it's all about confidence. Like, do a couple of things just to get your confidence going. Like, pat someone on the back, say great play, make a good steal, get a rebound, get a defensive stop. It's hard to come into game and hit a 3-pointer. It's very hard, especially if you don't get a lot of playing time. Do something small to get your confidence going, and the coach should be doing the same thing with the player. Like Mike said, the coach is the adult. Sometimes, it's got to come from the kids, but the coach has to help the kids sometimes, especially if the kids don't get a lot of playing time, say, hey, we're with you. Don't worry. Go out there. We got your back. And pick something small to help your confidence going. Number two, if you have a blowout lead, there's other things you could focus on to complement that you can't do in other games. Okay. Small things. Again, I think that would be a good thing that won't offend other people in the gym. It looks like you're coaching, but you know what? Hey, we've been asking so-and-so to get a rebound all year. They haven't been focused on rebound. They got a rebound. Let's all celebrate that. So-and-so sprinted back to defense. Okay. They never sprint back to defense. They finally did it. Like, there's other things you can emphasize in those situations to kind of make it kosher for all parties around. And you could also coach your kids at this moment and say, hey, let's win with respect. We're going to shake hands. We're not going to make anyone feel, put anyone down. There's always teaching moments, and it's just about shifting and pivoting what we're going to focus on in these moments, if that answers your question.
And Tamir, we have a few questions, some more player oriented. I wanted to get into this one that was just sent. It's a good question that just talks about more the player's perspective. Going into your situation, I know I grew up with ADHD, and it was not something that was just limited to the classroom. It affected, sometimes it would affect, your workouts. It would affect your focus in your workouts because you're thinking about some other things and you can't really focus. But with your experience as a player, how did you, and we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but how did you manage a lot of as you got older and older, a lot of the issues that you had? Because dyslexia, ADHD, they're not just related to the classroom, they're related to your everyday life. So how was it that you were able to figure out a way, and if there is, you can just kind of jump into that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Number one, you have to have an open line with the coach. Like, I think it's very important that the player, especially if you're dyslexic like me, and I'm extremely dyslexic, just seeing these questions on the right-hand side of my screen, there's like, I can't even look at them as people are like writing them in. But I think, and you have to be blessed to have a coach that has an open line. And at the beginning of the season, say, hey, look, coach, I could barely read and write. And scouting reports are very hard for me. Certain plays are very hard for me, but if you get me in the open floor, I'm seeing things that other people don't see. All right. So you have to have communication and an open line where a player could feel comfortable either before or after, even during practice, and say, hey, here's my struggles, here's my blessings. Let's get through this together. So that's the first thing. And then second of all, you have to realize as a player, there are certain times where you're going to need help. There's certain things in my life I need help. I don't know how many points we're up by. There were certain guys on the team that have to come on time. We're winning by 15, 16, 17. Like, I'm lost here. What are we up by? It's okay. It's a balance. It's okay to ask help when you need help, but it's also okay to say, like, okay, what is that person going to do for you that you can't do for yourself? Meaning, you have to have your healthy self-confidence. You have to know what you could bring to the table without ever making yourself feel like a victim, but at the same time, understanding where you do need help, do need to ask for help, and communicate that way. It's a big balance. But you know what? If you establish yourself with a good reputation as a hard worker and someone who's committed to the team and someone who's easy to get along, these things will go a lot easier for you as a player. You got to establish yourself. Like, I made myself a commitment that, like, I barely passed my SATs. I had all these Division I offers, but I couldn't pass my SAT. So how embarrassing is that? But I put myself in my brain, like, if I ever pass this thing, which I did with the bare minimum, I'm going to kick butt once I get to college. And I made Dean's List. All from hustle and hustle and hustle and hustle. And I made sure that, like, I was going to win every race in sprints. Like, I couldn't be the greatest shooter. I couldn't be the best player, whatever it is, Division I basketball scholarship. But, like, anything that had to do with, like, hustle and being on time and, like, weight room stuff or, like, classroom stuff or wherever I could get a controllable, I was going to get that, and establish myself a reputation as a hard worker and easy to get along. And then these things you put yourself in a situation for these things to go a little bit better for you in general, especially in a team sport like basketball.
I'll chime in a little based on what Tamir was saying. I just actually looked up a quote because I feel like quotes really at least resonate with me and with most people, how coaches have such a major impact on kids in sports. It says, uncoachable kids become unemployable adults. Let your kids get used to someone being tough on them. It's life. Get over it. Let's talk about grit a little. I remember when I spent a lot of time on the bench and talk about ADHD. I've had it my whole life. Just my wife told me at 41 that you need to start taking medications, and I did. And thank God I'm married 21 years. You learn to deal with what your challenges are, and the stigma of medication is gone. It's gone. It works for some kids. It backfires on other kids. But when it came to sports as an athlete, a work ethic, there were players who were much better than me. But I always say to kids, nobody could outwork you if you don't let them. And by outworking somebody, it gives them that sense of self. And that's what our goal is here, right? How do we give kids self-worth in a society that's telling them not to be you? You got to try to prepare your kid out there in sports and in life for a ferocious, non-forgiving world. So the parents think, or coaches, that being soft and gentle with the players is going to make a functioning adult. It's not. There's nothing wrong with giving tough love. Whenever I coached, volunteer coach, even private one-on-one, which is what I do professionally, I always think to myself, how could I get the best out of this kid with tough love? Tough love is not an easy thing. Akiva, you're a therapist. You could probably follow up on that. Tough parenting is, but what if it's easy today for the kid? It's like the difference between excuses and discipline, right? They make excuses. Today is easy. Tomorrow is hard. You have discipline. Today is hard. Tomorrow is easy. We have to start being a little bit tougher with our kids. Get them used to what the world is out there. It ain't Mr. Softy. You want everyone to be your friend? Become an ice cream man. Everyone will love you.
So I'll chime in here too. I on the one hand, yes. And sports is, I mean, what a playground to, to discover your abilities and your superpowers, right? And each one in their own individual, whatever it is. But, and here's the big but, and I think this is sort of, where tough love can be misconstrued, can be misused, can be, dare I say, abused. And I think we got to be careful when we throw that term around, because I think, for another quote, rules without relationship equals rebellion, right? And I think in our case, with sports where it's an elective, I think it just equals checking out, right? So I think the relationship is key. And Tamir, that's to your point, about communication, right? It has to be, you have a relationship with the kid, right? Coach and kid, he knows that that you love him. He knows that you look him in the eye, and even though he's the fifth guy off the bench, right? He knows that you see him, right? What a disaster it is to not be seen. I think that's that's universal. That's all kids. If we're not seen, we're crushed. And again, the currency often on these teams are, does coach give me the time of day? Are they all having one-on-ones and I'm not? With coach, forget playing time, which is the obvious currency, but that attention is so key. And that love, if it's just tough, if it's just rah-rah, if it's just, the come on, work harder, without that relationship, I think we have nothing. I think the whole thing collapses in our hands. So just to balance out that point, which I completely agree with. And, and grit is something that, kids, absolutely, they're not asked to show it or perform in that way, or there isn't even really a space to even try. So it's, again, this delicate balancing act, and it's a tall task.
I think when there's some of the questions I'm looking at that kind of jump off some of these points. There's a good question about, do you think it's important for coaches to make themselves available to kids? And kind of jumping off the discussion we were having, if they're having real life issues, other issues, like I guess what is the coach's boundary where it starts going into, becoming a more parental figure? And just my 2 cents, I know that you are a parental figure for some of these student athletes. Not everyone's home life is the same. So you might have students who are players who don't have a good role model at home, and you almost take on that issue. So there is some aspects where you don't want to cross lines too much, but if there's a kid who just really doesn't have anything else and they're leaning on you, I know that you always want to make yourself available for that particular player. You don't want to just shut them out and be like, no, this is just a coaching relationship. I think, as a coach, you're a role model in all aspects of your life. I know I still am very close with the coach who taught me basketball in high school. Him and I, remain close, and he's still a role model to me. So I have those relationships where the coaches took me off the court and helped me through struggles that I had in my personal life.
I think it's also a lot of times when it comes to coaches, you hit it on the head, Kevin, when you said about it's a fine line. Where coach draw the line? There's a very good chance that a kid that has no paternal figure at home and has a coach who he's connected to, he's going to trust him. He's going to want to be connected to him, and he's going to want to open up to him. Then we roll into the area of where do you draw that line in the sand? A young player says something that happened at home. Do you get involved? Do you not get involved? That's where things become a little sticky, where you need guidance and you need to use your instinct and gut, because sometimes it could backfire. But if a kid tells you bad stuff is going on at home, where do you draw that line? And that's where that's a separate thing with coaching, which becomes very delicate issue. I've seen it on a lot of levels, professionally, with kids that I deal with whose relationships are strained at home and they want advice and guidance, or they're a player and their parents just got divorced. And I say the same thing to every single kid. Just because your parents don't love each other anymore, it doesn't mean that they don't love you. But a lot of times kids pick up the energy at home, and we need to make sports, we need to make the playing field their respite, where they find comfort, where they find serenity. Like Tamir said, when he was on the open court, you couldn't stop him because you didn't have to think about it. What do they say in sports? That boys react and think, and sometimes girls think and then react. I see it with my own kids because I have a boy and a girl who have both played, and I've coached them both. And I'm that father like everybody else. You want your kid to be the stud, but most of the time they're not. And you need to accept your kids for who they are, or teach them the life lessons of working harder, of putting in the time and figuring out how you can become the best version of you. Because sports will, if you're lucky, you get to be 50 years old, and I still get to play and love all sports. I'm not diving for that loose ball, and I ain't taking offensive charging. That wasn't mine, or defensive charging, but I'll do everything else out there. And you got to know your limitations also. Know your role. It's another important thing for life. In business also, you have a customer, you have a relationship with them. What do they like? What do they need? It's the same thing with a coach. A coach has to understand his player and where they're coming from. And if he's having a rough day, then you've got to be sensitive. I said all about the white gloves, Akiva. Tough love. I've learned how to do it. My father taught me how to play baseball by throwing a hard ball at my face. That's how I learned how to catch. But I can assure you, no hard ball was ever hitting me in the face after that.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time. I just want to share one story that I think is very relevant for parents and coaches. And I've been blessed to have 5 kids of my own. It happened with one of my own kids when they were younger. Back in the day, like if you got a call from a teacher that said, so-and-so is acting up in school, there was no way you were allowed to play in the game that night. It was just like, so we got that call and for one of our kids. And I said, you know what? My first initial thought is, well, he's not going to play tonight. That's it. He's going to sit. And then I said, you know what? I'm not even going to say anything about that. Got a note from the teacher or whatever. I'm just going to talk about it later. So I let him play, and he ends up hitting the game-winning shot. And he comes home, he takes a shower, have his favorite meal ready for him. Don't say anything. Let him have great dinner. He goes to sleep. Everything's great. Wakes up the next morning. We walk to school. Just as we're ready to walk into school, I say, you know what? Guys that hit game-winning shots, they don't act up in school. And he looked at me and he's like, you're right. And that was the end of it. Really, it was like a massive change in his life. And I'm like, imagine if I would have kept him home. Imagine if I would have yelled at him. You know, the whole point here is, both as coaches and parents, we have to talk to kids from a place where they feel strong and they feel good about themselves, and they know that we're talking to them because we love them. And when I looked at him and I say, guys that hit game-winning shots, he knew that, you know, that was a place of strength. He wasn't beat down. You know, it was a healthy place in his heart, and it was able to make a change that lasted a really long time and continues to actually last. So I think, you know, we could talk here forever. We love each other, man. All these people, thank you so much for joining us. But I think the main takeaway for me is, you know, always talk from a place of love, and make sure we're talking to people we're talking to them, to their strong points, and not to a place that's like bringing them down, because talking to a place of positivity could lead to more positive change, in my opinion, instead of just, you know, breaking people down. And how many, you know, I'm 40 now, how many people do I run into in the street that are 40, 50 now, and they say, hey, I never played sports because my 8th grade gym teacher was mean to me, right? You know, it's like, because you're talking to a kid in a place of weakness instead of talking to them in a place of strength. So yeah,
I'm
I
also
don't
going
know.
to end off, Kevin, I'm going to end off with a quote. It's always great. I feel like we should do this offline now. And when it comes to kids in terms of professionally, I always say to parents on every level, you get more honey from bees than vinegar. That means you want to get the most out of a kid, be sweet about it. Do it with honey, not vinegar, because that's the only way, you know, to get the most out of a child. And talk to them, not above them. Again, the body language, Tamir, the eye contact, looking in the eye. And that's why Zoom and all this was so challenging for people, because the body energy is such an important thing in business, in life, in marriage, in everything. So this was so productive. I really hope that whoever listened, if one follower ended up, you know, translating this into something real life, which is what this is. I don't think this is Fantasy Island. Then this is something that we should continue doing, and spreading the good vibe and the good word, which is so desperately needed in the world.
Yeah, thank you everybody so much. Kiva, Kevin, everybody. You guys are awesome, man. Mike.
This was great,
was
guys.
great.
Yeah. Thank you guys. This was terrific. And we had a few conversations on the side where people asked, can this be a normal thing? Can we have these conversations more? And, you know, I'd be willing to do this. This is a great conversation. It's a great talk. I mean, I always said my favorite thing when I coach is after the game, when the coaches are sitting around talking about the game, because then you have all of these basketball minds, or, you know, soccer minds coming together to be like, what could we have done better? What worked? What didn't? Those are my favorite things. So when we have discussions like this, these are my favorite things, where you have a problem or you have a solution, and you confer with each other with just other really brilliant minds. And I was honored to be part of this. So thank you guys all.
Thank you, guys. Have an awesome day.
Thank you guys, man.
Thank you
so
guys.
much.
Have a great day.
All the best.